I'm Bobby Watson, the Human Rights Fellow for Texas Impact. I'm here with Ilka Vega, one of our partners who works for the United Women in Faith. We are here nearing the end of COP. We're at the end of this day, and we only have 2 more days left. Ilka and I both work on immigration-related issues, and we just attended an event over climate mobility and how to implement climate mobility in National Action Plans, or NAPs. What did you think of that event, Ilka?
I think it was very important. When we talk about adaptation in general, we are recognizing or cognizant of the impacts that climate has on displacement. And up until now, countries haven't had demonstrated the ability to receive internally displaced people, especially within their borders, that have been forced to migrate, forced to move due to climate disasters or long-lasting impacts of climate change, like droughts, multi-year droughts that we've seen. And so implementing this plan for mobility in their National Adaptation Plans really makes sure that those that are mostly impacted for climate change within the countries are really giving the humanitarian assistance that they're giving, but also the countries are prepared to welcome them, to organize their urban plans, their housing facilities, and really think about it more systematically on how to adapt to an ever-evolving world in which we're going to see more climate movement.
Yeah, so one thing that's really interesting about this event is that we heard from a variety of countries. Particularly, we heard from landlocked developing countries and island state countries. And so we heard examples from Somalia, from the Marshall Islands, and from several other areas. And what was so clear is that the governments for these countries had faced so much climate crisis and had so much internally displaced movement that they are really aware and trying really hard to implement climate mobility into their national action plan. So and when we say climate mobility, we talk about making maps and using data to figure out where people are going to move on based on climate disasters, and to just kind of use that in their decision making so that they can create safe pathways and have the resources ready for people to move. And something that's really interesting coming from the U.S. context is that we don't have a national action plan. We don't have a NAP. And our reality is that we are still focused on have such a polarized view of both climate change and migration, that we're not addressing either of these issues in the same way or as seriously as these countries. We're seeing reports now where people are starting to predict where we could see some displacement from climate change in the U.S. And there are states in the South, like Texas, that are expected to see extreme droughts and extreme weather and extreme heat, and for that to potentially cause some movement and displacement in our own country. And so kind of reconciling that, and from our own U.S. perspective, is something that's really interesting to see here in this context at COP.
Right, and thinking about the internal displacement, but then also bringing it to the international lens. We've seen already after Katrina a lot of displacement that took place in the U.S. and the challenges that those communities had into reallocating into different neighborhoods, and many were able to be received by welcoming neighbors, and I think that's something that we want to continue to be seeing also in the international neighbor, as we see people from different countries being displaced and coming across borders to try to seek protection, to try to seek new environments where they can rebuild their lives and their homes, right? And so something that we've been seeing, unfortunately, at the international level is the lack of international protection for climate migrants and refugees. That's something that we're still pending to see, and something that we want to push in the agenda, not only so that we're providing the according humanitarian efforts, which we still need to do a lot to make sure that migration paths are safe, but we also need to ensure regular migration through legal pathways that people can safely utilize, apply from their own countries, and then be able to cross borders without so many barriers to migration, and without so much violence also in the routes when they end up having to take that are put them in a precarious situation. So here trying to talk to countries that have some of that experience in implementing those frameworks, bringing them together, and it was great, I think, that we got to hear from so many different countries across the world that have a lot of experience and that by implementing those plans, we can really already see concrete examples of what we could be doing at home, right? Because they're dealing with mostly internally displaced persons, but there are definitely lessons learned that can be implemented for migrants and refugees that are crossing borders as well.
Yeah, and to just, I think, to put a point on that is that we are not addressing these issues in the global context. We see that the U.S., I think our officials often have a hard time of putting our situation in the global context and seeing that we're not exempt from climate change. We're not exempt from displacement, and that migration is going to happen both to the U.S. and internally, and we have to seriously start addressing these issues.